Hello students, hope you have seen my previous videos, Unit 3. So we have completed Unit 3 and now we are into Unit 4. So in Unit 4, the first topic is going to be about functions. And let us give a brief introduction about functions and why you need a functions, a syntax. And we'll see one small example and then we'll move on to the types, right? So what is this function? So every time we say we'll write a program and we'll say main program and functions you have, right? So what is this function? So a function is nothing but a block of statements that accepts the inputs, performs the specific task and it produces an output, right? So I have got a group of statements that is going to take some input, perform some action and produce an output, right? So, and why I need a function? Every program takes an input, produces an output. So, why I need a function specifically, right? So, why I need a function is, see, suppose in my program, I'm writing one program. In that program, I want to calculate the sum of three numbers again and again, right? Or else you check greatest of the numbers again and again I want to use it, or if I want to do some calculation again and again, repeated things in my program, then I need to write those statements again and again in my program, right? I am going to do only one operation. That operation I am going to do many number of times, right? So that one operation I can make it as a common function. Whenever I want to perform that operation, I can call that particular function, right? For that only we are going for using the functions. So if I want to have a same set of statements, right, and that is going to perform the same task, then there are two ways. One way is create a function to perform that particular task, or else I can write the same statements again and again in my program. So which is going to be better? See, if I write the same set of statements again and again, my program will be very big, right? So instead of that, if I have only the function, whenever I want to perform that particular operation, I can call the function, right? So always the second option is going to be more effective. Why? Because in the first option I am going to use the same set of statements again and again. If I want to do the same operation for 10 times, for example, if that operation requires 4 lines, 10 into 4, 40 lines I need to write again and again, right? Instead of that, I can write just a function with 4 lines. Whenever I need that particular operation, I can call the function. So the second one is going to be the good practice of writing the program, right? So what is the benefit of writing the programs? So improves readability of the code. It is not going to be big. By seeing that, you know that it is going to be repeated. So for that I have used the function. So improves the readability of code. Improves reusability of the code. So this function I can use it in any programs, right? And debugging of the code would be easier. If my program is going to be small, then debugging my code will be easy, right? Reduces the size of the code. Since I have got less number of statements, the size of the program is going to be less, okay? And the repetition is going to be replaced by your function calls. So what is a function? Function is, I'll repeat it once again. What is a function? Function is nothing but a block of statements that is going to take an input, process and it is going to produce an output, right? Why I need a function? Why? Because of all these reasons. And what for this is going to be benefited? Because I need not write the same set of statements again and again. Instead of that, I can just use one time and whenever I want, I can just call the program. Is that clear? Right, there are two types of functions available. One, you are going to call it as a predefined or a standard or library functions. and these functions are already defined in our header files, right? For example, your math.h you have power, and in string you have string copy, reverse, right? Absolute is used to find the absolute of a number, right? All these are going to be the built-in functions available in your header files. So I need not write a separate program for all these functions. I can straight away use these functions. And already in the string we have seen string copy is used to copy the one string to another string, right? If we don't have that function, then we need to write so many lines, right? That is a main advantage of your functions. So whenever I have a function, it is enough if I just use the name of the function. I need not write the entire code once again. Whenever I want to do the string copy, I can do it. Is that clear? Right. The next one is going to be the user-defined functions. So in user-defined functions is nothing but the functions that are defined by the user. Then you call that to be a user-defined functions. So it's nothing but the programs what we write. You are going to call it as an user-defined functions. The syntax for the user-defined function is going to be this: return type, the function name, and the argument list. Clear? And I have my own set of statements. Before moving on to writing the function, you should know what is function declaration and what is function definition. See, whenever I have any variable, right? For example, if I have int a is nothing but a declaration to tell the compiler that a is of type integer, right? Why I need a declaration? Because to tell the compiler that a is going to occupy this many number of bytes. Yes or no? So similarly here for the function I need a declaration. So this declaration will tell the compiler that I am going to have a specific function, and that function is going to take this many arguments and it is going to return you this type. Is that clear? So for that only we are going to have for a function declaration. So this is a return type, function name, and the parameter list. So here I will tell what are all the parameters I am going to accept. Here I need not specify the name of the parameters, just I can specify the type. What are all the type I am going to accept here and what is the return type here, right? We'll see one example. So this is an example here. Int is my return type. Sum is going to be the name of the function, and here I am going to have two arguments. So the compiler will tell that this is going to be the sum. Sum is a function that is going to take these two arguments, and this is going to be the return type from my sum. Clear? And here I need not specify the variable names because it is just a declaration to tell. So I am going to accept all these things and I am going to produce this. Right? So here I can just write int comma int. Why int comma int? Because just an type is enough. I need not mention the variable name. But even if you mention your variable name, there is no problem in it. Clear? And what is the other name for your function declaration is function prototyping, because I am telling the prototype of the particular function, how my function will be. What is an input, what is an output, right? So tells the user how to call the function. So from this I know that I need to pass two parameters to my function. Already we have seen in string copy and all, right? String copy, it is going to take two parameters. One is a destination, the other one is going to be the source. Both the things is of going to be type string. So that will tell you how I have to call my function. Is it clear? Only if I know what type of argument I am going to pass to the function, I can call the particular function, right? So function declaration is nothing but just to tell the compiler that I am going to have a function and the function is going to take this number of arguments and these are all the type of the arguments and this is going to be my return type, right? Another name for your function declaration is function prototyping. And this will tell you how to call the function, right? It's just a declaration. So here itself the semicolon will end. Int a, you will put a semicolon. The same thing here, right? The next one is function definition. And what is this function definition is? The function definition refers to the implementation of the function, right? So here only I am going to give the actual body of the function. So return type, function, whatever you have specified here, the same thing you have to specify in your definition. I cannot change. Here I cannot give return type to be character, and here I cannot give the return type as int, because whatever you have declared here, in the same way you have to define it. So return type, name of the function, and the parameter list. When you see here, I don't have a semicolon here, because the function is continuing here. So I have a open braces, I have a closed braces, I have got a set of statements. Clear? Right. And the function name is nothing but helps to identify the function, like how we have int a comma b. So a is used to identify one variable, b is to identify another variable. So here also I have got a function name to identify my function. So when invoking the function, whenever I am calling the function, the value will be copied to the parameter. That I will tell you what is this. Now you need not worry about it. And the function will have the return, and that will mark the end of the function. The return type will tell you the what is going to be the output of the function. So here I have a return type. So this return type will tell you what my function is going to return. Here I can accept int, and I can also return float. That is not a major problem, right? So whatever you have given here it as return type, that return type only that function should return. Is that clear? If I have int here, it is not necessary that I should return int here. Understood? Right. So I'll recollect once again. Function declaration is nothing but to tell the compiler that I have got a function with this type of argument and this return type, and you have a semicolon at the end of your function declaration. The function declaration is also called as a function prototyping. And what is this function definition is? The function definition refers to the actual implementation of the function, and here I have no semicolon at the end, and here I have a set of statements. Clear? Right. Now this is going to be the difference between your function declaration and function definition. What is your declaration is? It's nothing but a prototype that specifies the function name, return types and parameters without the function body. I don't have the body of the function, but here I have the body of the function, and it tells the compiler about the function and how to call that function. And here you have the actual implementation of the function, and it tells what the function is, and here it tells what the function does. Here only we are actually implementing the function. So here I have the semicolon at the end, but here I don't have a semicolon at the end of my parameter list. Clear? Right. Now this is going to be the simple function, right? How the function will be called and how it will be, right? So here let us see one simple template like this. Hash include stdio.h, and here I told you already we should inform the compiler that you have a function. So here I have a declaration. So void is going to be my return type. I am not returning any type. If I am not returning any type, then I need to specify void here, and this is going to be the name of the function. And here I am not going to take any argument, so I am not specifying anything. If you are not specifying anything also, you can specify void, right? This is a declaration. Then I have got a main program here, and then here I am having the function definition. See, if I don't have this statement, right, and in the main program if I have this function name, then it will give you an error. Why? Because the compiler doesn't know where the function is. So if I declare the function name here in the beginning, then I can use the function name here. Then later on I can define the function outside after your main, no problem, right? If you don't want the function declaration, but it is always better to have the function declaration, but if you don't want this function declaration at all, then what I can do is, then I can directly write this entire function before my main. Clear? In that case, no need of declaration separately. I can have as it is. Is that clear? So if you are defining the function after main, then you need to compulsorily have the declaration. Suppose if you are having the function before the main, in that case a declaration is not necessary because we have already defined the function and then only you are using the function here. Is that clear? But it is always a better way to declare a function before using it. Is that clear? Right. So what happens, how the control will be transferred or how the function will be executed? So you already know the compilation always begins from the main execution. So here from the main it will start executing. Once I see the function name, we have already tell the compiler that you have got a function name like this. So whenever I see this, the control will be transferred to the function. So here I will perform what are all the operations. Once I see the curly braces here, the control will be transferred to the next line following the function call. This you will call it as a function call. Is that clear? So after the completion of the function, the control jumps back to the main function. Clear? So these are the few points that you need to know, right? So what are the few points you have related to the function is, every C program will have a function and that function you are going to call it as a main, and from where the execution starts, right? And every function will have a return type. Even in main you are having return 0. If you are not using return, it will give you a warning, right? So always a function will have a return type. If the function doesn't return any value also, you can just write return. You need not write return void, return anything, just have return alone, right? So if the return type of the function is void, still you can use the return statement, that is what given here, right? And return is nothing but an termination of the function. Even if you are not writing return, it will just give you a warning, but it is better to use return. Even if the function is not returning any value, it is advisable to use the return statement. And the function can be called without any parameters, right? That means it is not accepting any parameters here. It is empty here. In that case, you need to write void. Okay? Right. Suppose if you are not declaring it, okay, and if you are defining it, then if you are not declaring it and you are calling the function, then the compiler will automatically take like this int, the name of the function, and here no arguments. So suppose if you have written a function differently, then this would give you an error. So whenever you are defining the function outside the main, right, after main, then it is compulsory to have your declaration before the main. Is that clear? Right. The next one, each C program must have at least one function which is a main. That is what we have seen. And no limit on the number of functions. I can have any functions in my program. And whenever a function calls itself, then you call that to be a recursion. That we will see in the second part of your fourth unit, right? Now, previously we have seen one small template like example where how the control is being transferred, etc. Now we will see an actual function, a small program, right? So here I am going to calculate the sum of two numbers. So this you are going to call it as a declaration. So void, I am not going to return anything. Sum is going to be the name of the function. And here I am going to take two arguments of type integer. Now when you see here I am accepting the integer, but here I am returning void. So your return type need not match with the parameters. But whenever you are returning, if you have returned here int, then you should return only int. You cannot return character or you cannot return float. Is that clear? Right. So this you will call it as a declaration. And here I have a main program, int a comma b. I am going to take two integers values. So I am reading two integer values ampersand a ampersand b. Now I am calling the function. What is my function here? Sum. So sum is going to take two arguments, two parameters I have specified int comma int. So I am going to pass a and b, and then I am closing here. Is that clear? Now the control will be transferred to sum. So in sum, when you see here, I have got int e comma int f. Now here I have passed a. Here also it need not be same. If I used a here, it is not necessary to use the same a. That is different, this is different. Is that clear? Even if you use the same a, it is not going to make any difference because it is a new variable, int e. So here I am going to get the value of a, and f. Here I am going to get the value of b. Only the value is being passed to the function. Right? Now here printf, I am going to calculate e and f, and I am going to printf. Here when you see I have just used return. Right? I have print the value, but just I am returning. Here it is void. Void means this function is not going to return any type. But even though it is not returning, always it is advisable to use return. So the control will be transferred here. Here I don't have any statement, so it gets over. Right? So when you see here, we have got two new terms. And one you are going to call it as an actual parameters or arguments. And here this I am going to call it as a formal parameters. Right? Actual means here it is an actual value that I am going to pass it. Right? And here these are all going to be the formal parameters. Right? Whatever the variables you are using it in the function, you will call that to be a formal parameters. Right? And here this you will call it to be a caller. And this you are going to call it as an called or callee. So here this is a caller. From here only I am calling the function sum. So this is a called function, or I can also call it as callee. Clear? Right. So we'll see what is actual parameters. Values that are passed to the function when it is invoked. So when we see here, we are calling the function sum. There we have passed a and b. So the values that are passed to the function when it is invoked, we are going to call it as actual parameters. What are formal parameters? Are the variables defined by the function that receives the values when the function is called. We are going to call it as a formal parameters. Clear? And here I need to include the data types. Right? And here I need not mention the data types. And here it is being in the calling function, and formal parameters will be in the called function. This can be asked in 2 marks. Difference between the actual parameters and formal parameters. Right? And now we'll move on to the type of user defined functions. Already I told you in function you have two different types. One is going to be the standard or predefined functions. Other one is going to be the user defined functions. In user defined functions, again you have got 4 types. Okay, so what are all the 4 types? And we'll see one small example under each category. Right? And what is this? See, now I told you the function can return a value. The function need not return a value. It can take arguments. It need not take arguments. So I have got two things, function taking argument and function returning the value. So with this two I have 4 combinations, right? That is why you have 4 different types of user defined functions. So first we'll see a function with no arguments and no return value. It is neither going to take arguments nor it is going to return you value. And what is the second one? Function with no arguments and a return value. I am not going to take any arguments, but I am going to return a value, right? And the third one with argument and no return value. And the fourth one with argument and a return value. So we'll see one by one. When we see the example, you can able to understand. So don't get scared by seeing this terminologies, right? Right. So we'll see. What is the first type we have? Function with no argument, no return type. It is not going to accept argument or it is not going to return you the type. So this is what we'll straight away move to the example, because whatever we have said here, that is what given in these statements. And mainly we use these types of functions whenever we want to print something like that. We'll use this type. Okay, let us move on to the example. So hash include stdio.h. So this is going to be the function declaration. I'm repeating again and again. Why? Because you should be familiar with what is function declaration, what is function definition. Now this is a return type, the name, and here the argument list. I told you it is going to be of the type no return type, no argument. So here also I have got void. So here also I need to write void. If you not write void also, it is going to be no arguments, but generally you should write void. Is that clear? So void get number void. Clear? Now I have a main program int main. Directly I am calling the function because I am not going to pass any argument, right? So directly I am calling the function. What is the function? Great number. I am going to find the greatest of two numbers. So it is not, return type is going to be void great num. Here I am in the function, I am going to declare two variables I and j. So this you will call it to be the local variables. So local variables of the functions. Is that clear? Right? So it's a local variable of the function. Inside the function also I can write how we will write in the main. In the same way you can write it, right? So int I comma j and printf enter the two numbers. Sorry, it is not to compare. Yes, to greatest of two numbers. So enter two numbers you want to compare, and I am reading the two numbers using the scanf ampersand I and ampersand j. And if I is greater than j, I am writing greater number is I, else I am writing the greater number is j. Okay. And already I told you, you need to have a return even though the function is not returning any value. It is returning only void, right? It is not returning anything, but it is advisable to use your return. The return will mark the end of the function, right? So everything and I am doing inside the function. So I am reading the values, I am comparing, I am printing. I am not doing anything in the main, right? So whenever I return from function, this will be returned here. Again, I don't have any statement to execute. So my function gets over. Is that clear? So this type is nothing but a function with no argument, no return type. So inside the function I am going to do all the operations, right? And the next one. What is the next one? You have a function with no argument and a return value. Here I am going to have a return value, right? So here we won't pass any arguments to the function, but we are going to return a value, right? So here I have a return type to be int. And here I have the function name. Here it is not going to accept any argument. So here I am not passing any argument. Here also you need to write a void. Now int main. So inside the main, Here also I am not going to pass any parameters, but I am going to accept the value from the function, right? So here I need one variable. Whenever the function returns the value, I need to store the value in one more variable. For that I have got a result, right? So printf the greater number. In the main program I am printing the result. Clear? Right. So this is my function int great num. Here I don't have anything, so void int ij num, because I am not getting any argument from the main program. So only in this program I am going to get the values of two variables I and j. So here I have ij, and the result I am going to pass on to the main program. So for that I have got num. And here I am asking the user printf enter the two numbers you want to compare. In the scanf I am reading the two values I and j. If I is greater than j, I am assigning I to num, else I am assigning j to num. And then I am returning the num, because this function can return integer. So whatever the value I am returning here, that will be stored in the result, right? And that result I am going to print it in the main program. So here I am returning, but here I am not accepting any value. Clear? Right. Next we will move on to the third type. Here function with arguments and no return value. So here the function is going to accept the arguments, but it is not going to return any value, right? So hash include stdio.h. Similarly, since it is not going to return any value, I am going to write it as void. Here again I am going to use the same great num, greatest of two numbers. Since here the function is going to accept the argument, here I have specified the arguments. Here you can write int comma int, or else you can also write like this, int a, int b. Is that clear? Since it is a declaration, the semicolon is must here, and then I have a main program, right? And then I have int ij, right? And here in the main program itself I am reading the two values I and j, and then I am calling the function great num. Since the function is not going to return any value, I need not assign the value to some other variable here in the main program. So here the control will be passed on to this function. It is not returning any value, and it is going to take two integer arguments. Here I have written I, but here it is I have declared it as x, no problem, right? You can use different names here. Only the values will be passed from here to here. So value of I will be passed on to x, value of j will be passed on to y. I am checking whether x is greater than y. If x is greater than y, I am printing x, else I am printing y. So here also you can just have the return. If you are not writing return also no problem, but it is a better way to write just return. Return 0 means it is going to return integer, but here we are not returning anything. It's just going to be a just return statement, right? Now we'll move on to the fourth type, where you have function with arguments and return value. Here I am going to have argument as well as I am going to have a return value. So how it will be? Now you check here. Sorry. Here my program. Here I have a declaration. It is going to return. The function is going to have a return type, and it is also going to accept the arguments. So here when you say I have a return type as well as I have a arguments. Is that clear? And here since I have an integer here, it is not necessary I should have integer here. Is that clear? In this program, since it is going to return you the greatest of two numbers, it cannot be float here. So I have an int here, right? So depending upon this return type will vary, right? So int main, this is a declaration, function declaration. Why I need function declaration? To tell the compiler that I have got a function that is going to take two integer arguments and it is going to return integer type. Clear?